News has just broken, to the dismay of local Portland residents, that the proposal to build a 15-storey waste incinerator, accompanied by a potentially 94-metre chimney, has been granted planning permission following an appeal. The decision, which will surely infuriate Portland locals, who stood staunchly against the initial proposals, was made by the Undersecretary of State for Building Safety and Homelessness, Rushanara Ali, who's MP for London's Bethnal Green and Bow. This following the recommendation from Planning Inspector Paul Griffiths. The proposals, initially put forward in September 2020, faced strong backlash from local residents and environmental and heritage groups too. A multifaceted attack was assembled, objecting to the planning permission proposal on terms of, to name a few, environmental damage, public health, disfigurement of the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site, and its suitability within Dorset County Council's waste plan. The council unanimously refused the £100 million investment, following over 3,000 individual objections, as well as public demonstrations, agreeing that the plans would fail to comply with the Dorset waste plan, would damage the quality of the landscape, and damage the existing structures of the port and the surrounding area. The decision was, however, appealed by Powerfuel Portland, and today's decision by the Undersecretary of State has led to a reinvigoration of panic on the island. The appeal decision is stated in a 184-page document, for which a link is provided in the description. The document states that the Secretary of State agrees with the inspector's conclusions and agrees with his recommendation. She has decided to allow the appeal and grant planning permission. When we look at the main issues section of the document, we can get a breakdown of each of the factors considered by the inspector and therefore by the Secretary of State. A great source of opposition in the initial rejection of the proposal was derived from the lack of a need for such an incinerator here on Portland. Dorset's unrecyclable waste is already processed in the Canford area before being incinerated in Marchwood near Southampton, which is closer than Portland to the processing plant. Dorset does not, allegedly, produce sufficient fuel to feed the incinerator, and thus in order to keep it burning 24/7, 365 days, for the proposed 30 years, chucking out 270 tonnes of carbon dioxide daily, it could be necessary to bring in waste from elsewhere, which is against Dorset Council's waste plan. The suspicion is that because it has been sited in a port directly on the waterfront, that plastic will be imported from elsewhere in the world to be incinerated here. Again, contra to the Dorset County Council waste plan rules. The document sets out a dense response to this issue, referring to a number of other potential plans to address waste disposal in the area. Quite frankly, I haven't come to grips with it yet, but the key takeaway is that overall, the Secretary of State agrees with the inspector that the proposal would have clear advantages over the sites allocated within the waste plan. The next section of the document, Heritage, states that there can be no doubt the proposal would be an insertion of massive scale, but that the proposal would not appear out of scale or out of place. The key focus is put upon its disruption of listed dockyard buildings, but these are doubtless not the most pressing factors in the minds of Portland locals. The Secretary of State, furthermore, affords significant weight to heritage benefits of the proposal, which outweigh the harms to the Grade 2 listed buildings, but it is difficult to imagine what these benefits might be, and they are not stated plainly in the covering pages of the document. I just want to note now that these details are almost certainly contained within the 184-page document, however satisfactorily. But the scope of this video has not been to deep dive, but just to give an overview of the situation. Regarding landscape, the Secretary of State and Inspector agree that the stack would not be an injurious presence, going on to state that the proposal would sit comfortably in the context of the existing port and would have no harmful landscape or visual effects from receptors on land or at sea. These conclusions will no doubt be disputed by opposition to the plans, and indeed seem very contrary to images produced during the initial backlash, which fit the dimensions detailed in the planning proposal. Here are two such projections, one cited from across the harbour and another from the hillside above the proposed site, from a video by Steve Coggins, which can be found in full in the description. Please take the time to watch it. The final main section, entitled Health, refers to the public health concerns as well as the impact on biodiversity. And these are where most of the objections to the incinerator are really coming from. The conclusion reached is as follows. There is no convincing evidence that the proposal would have detrimental health impacts, and neither is there anything convincing to suggest that the proposal would have a detrimental impact on biodiversity on land or sea or on water quality. However, graciously, it is accepted that there is a perception that the proposal would be harmful to the health of a population and a perception that the proposal would cause environmental damage, while it is further accepted that these perceptions could themselves inflict a negative impact on residents. Now, I thought they were burning plastic, not gaslighting. The conclusions regarding public health are supported by research commissioned by Public Health England in 2019 into the potential harms of municipal waste incinerators, which found that while it is not possible to rule out adverse health effects from these incinerators completely, any potential effect for people living close by is likely to be very small. However, similar sites in Runcorn and Derby have generated widespread distress and complaint, including vomit-inducing smells. And let's not forget that the Portland incinerator chimney will be level with and below residential neighbourhoods. The conclusions regarding the hazard posed to biodiversity on both land and sea will be hotly disputed. Locals fear microplastics and the effect of nitrogen pollution upon Portland's areas of rare calcareous grassland and the wildlife that calls it home, as well as the impact on sites of special scientific interest, the Fleet Lagoon wetlands, the adjacent Verne Special Area of Conservation and marine conservation zones to the east and the west. Those of us in opposition have 6 weeks to lodge a challenge with the High Court, though already the cost of such is cause for doubt and concern. Laura Baldwin, who is administrator of the Portland for the Planet Facebook group, has laid out the following potential avenues by which this decision may be challenged. And first is a hope for a moratorium on all unbuilt incinerators, not dissimilar to those that have been passed in Wales and Scotland. Secondly, changes to taxation through the UK emissions trading scheme, including CO2 emissions from waste incinerators to make it economically unviable. Third, the aforementioned expensive judicial review. And fourth, that Portland Port and the Langham family that own it will choose to develop the port in a different way. I've reached out to newly elected MP Lloyd Hatton for comment on what he plans to do and what the community should do. But undoubtedly he is facing a chimney full of emails at this time. Mr. Hatton was staunchly opposed to the plans before and during the election and restated such in a letter to a constituent just last week, where he pledged to continue to oppose this ill-conceived proposal before stressing the need for clean, renewable energy instead. Well, terrible jokes aside, our MP has gotten back to me, and besides a couple of the copy and paste pieces, he says, like you, I'm frustrated and deeply disappointed with the planning decision to grant permission for building a waste incinerator at Portland Port following a long appeals process. I firmly believe that building an incinerator here would be a mistake. Earlier this summer, I sent my formal objections to both the Environment Agency and the Secretary of State responsible to make my position clear. As this was a planning decision, I'm sure that you can appreciate that I am very much restricted in what I can do as a Member of Parliament. That said, I have and I will continue to raise our objections and serious concerns at every available opportunity. I want to reassure you that I will continue to work alongside local campaigners across South Dorset to oppose this ill-conceived proposal. So thank you very much to the Right Honourable Member for his comment, which basically sums up to say to keep fighting and keep protesting and that he'll do the same. Despite his continued assurances towards fighting the incinerator, some here may be feeling a touch of dismay that the party they've only just adopted in this constituency is the one to overturn the local council's unanimous ruling. Social media was previously a vital coordinating cog for groups in opposition, and comments reacting to the plans display the fear and downright horror towards the decision of, many note, an MP based in London. Laura Baldwin asked, how can such a decision be made by one person with questionable education on incineration and understanding of Portland? There is a widespread suspicion of foul play, as well as a general sense of dismay that the powers that be care not one jot for the small businesses and community that will be affected by this decision, and with reference to one recently permitting construction of a Starbucks. Scott Irvine's remarks on Facebook ring true with us all. That is not democracy, he says, and subsequently, time to get our banners out again.